Hey guys, I had a couple people ask about the um, budget bar tacker post that I put up on Instagram the other day, and essentially what it is, that's my bar tacker, is just it's an industrial buttonhole attachment, and on these ones you can actually set the space. So what it does is it stitches one row of zigzags down the left hand side, stitches back on the top, and then stitches another row of zigzags back on the right hand side. And with these ones, actually, you can set the gap between those two rows of stitching to 0. So instead of going and making a buttonhole with a space in the middle, it'll actually just stitch back and forth on top of each other, essentially making a bar tack. And I'm using this one on my Singer 20U, which is a zigzag machine, but I'm using it because I use this for the zigzag machine to do my bar tacking. But if the piece of material is thin, like two strips of webbing, for example, that I'm trying to tack together, the machine tends to not feed back over itself. So when I want to do the second, when I stitch down, it's fine. But if I want to stitch back, the machine has trouble because of the angle of the presser foot. So if I was stitching some strapping, for example, or some webbing onto a piece of material where the material is feeding back and forth underneath, it's not a problem. It's just when I'm trying to stitch, for example, something like this, which is just a sample piece, but if I'm just stitching a piece of webbing, basically what this does is it clamps the piece of webbing stationary and then moves it back and forth via some mechanism, some cams, and a ratcheting action. And basically I'll just show you kind of what it looks like. So I'll take a piece of, this is Meritech's 200 denier material. So say this was a piece of webbing, I can just put it underneath and it clamps it in place there. Turn the machine on. So what I've done with this particular buttonhole is I've marked the start point with a dot. So I know that that's the top of the cam. That's the very first point. So, oops. I think the plate, there's a cover plate that goes over top with the feed dogs, and I just have to make sure. Generally, I take the feed dogs out of this machine to use it for like embroidery, but I left them in because I was doing some zigzag stitching before. So just make sure that the feed dogs are covered by the cover plate, and that I'm not running the needle into the plate itself. It's a little bit finicky with this 20U, just because the plate doesn't line up like exactly with the holes, the pre-drilled holes in the bed. So I've had to play with it a little bit, but it seems to give a pretty good result. So I'll stick this underneath, just hold the tail there, and if I do one stitch, that's the top of my zigzag. Now I can just let it go, and it completes and then goes all the way back up. And I know that when I've reached back to my black mark here, that I'm now at the top of the cycle. And my tension's just a touch off, so you see a bit of the bottom thread showing through. I was doing some heavier material before, but it makes it's a good kind of alternative to having a bar tacker. If you have just a straight stitch machine, it's pretty quick, and it'll actually, I think I've done with this machine, I've done like up to 16 layers just testing it to see how far it'll go. So I guess the only thing it doesn't really do is it doesn't do the initial stitch down the middle like a bar tack would do, a row of straight stitching back up, and then you'd zigzag over top of that straight stitching. So if you had this, sorry, just get that in the frame. If you had this set up with a set of stitches already done, you could just cover it with this zigzag, and it would be quite quick actually. Just do another one there. I've just adjusted the tension, so. And I find if you if you just let it go at a constant speed, it'll go quite quickly. But if you just make sure that your speed is constant, you get quite a nice tack. And this is adjustable up to, I believe, 1¼ inches or down to 3/8 of an inch. And then you can also adjust the width of the tacks. This is the maximum width. It's probably 3 30 seconds wide, maybe just a little, just a hair about there, under a quarter inch or so. But that also depends on the thickness of your material. For example, if you're doing something spongy, you get less. Like this is some mesh, some air knit, 3D mesh, or whatever trade name you want to use. So you'll get a shorter stitch width just because it's going through so much thickness of material. Just do it just to test it. I haven't tested with the air mesh yet, actually, but. So you can see there, that's it's quite a bit narrower than on the Bartack. Just show you a little for comparison, kind of the widths. But this buttonholer, it cost me about $45 with free shipping, and this one's made in Taiwan, but it's based off of a 1940s era Japanese build. And honestly, I mean, if you need something that is dedicated for tacking, or you want to do buttonholes or something, this is a nice piece of kit to have. And it's for $40, versus spending a couple thousand on a bar tacker. I mean, this is for someone who's trying to maybe go down to one machine or less machines. It's a good option. If you had this set up on for example, an automatic machine that had automatic single needle machine that had thread cutting, you could essentially knock back a bunch of Bartacks and it would cut the thread in between. I've got a Mitsubishi LS2-180, which is an automatic single needle plane machine. I have this Singer on the side, so I haven't had the need to set up the LS2. Just because having two machines is nice, and this one I don't really use it for much except for specialty stuff like embroidery or occasionally bar tacking, and now I've got it set up as my tacker. The nice thing about this machine as well is it uses kind of a longer needle clamp screw. So basically this arm here, basically this arm sits on top of the needle screw, and as the needle bar moves up and down, it ratchets and drives the mechanism forward. So without having to do this buttonholer comes with an extra screw and some mounting hardware as well, but I actually managed to make it fit on straight away just without changing anything. So it's nice to be able to pull it on and off, and I can show, if you're interested, I can show you a setup of how easy it is to put on and off. But yeah, quite happy and quite impressed with this little guy. And if you want a link to the description where I bought this particular one, I can put it in the video in the description below. But I'm sure if you just search, excuse me, industrial buttonholer on the internet, on Google, you'll find the seller who sells a model like this probably in your area, actually. So if you have any more questions, just fire me a message or leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks.